Hey, my name is Brianna, and I love to talk about brain chemicals and how nutrition affects the brain and the body. Today I'm going to be talking about OCD. If you have been affected by someone who has had OCD, or if you've had it yourself, I'm truly sorry because I know how disruptive it can actually be. So let's just start by defining OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. This is not just having an affinity for clean things or needing things a certain way. This is something that takes over someone's entire brain space and can really ruin their life. For some people, it might look like going back to check if the stove was left on 20 times. It could be counting things like how many steps they've taken. It can be even as intense as hiding all potential weapons from themselves because they're afraid that they're going to hurt someone even though they have no intentions to do that. For me, my OCD kind of took on more of a moral and religious stance, and I can talk about that more in another video. But either way, it's extremely disruptive to your life, and even though you don't want to act on these compulsions, you really feel like you just have no choice, and you'll try your best to completely ignore them, but I just can't explain the power that those thoughts have. So typically, if you have OCD, they'll prescribe you something like a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And in 50% of people, this works, they're all good. And then in other people, it just doesn't. Or maybe it works for a few weeks, and then their symptoms come back. So one of the other brain chemicals that they're beginning to do research on is glutamate. And glutamate is your major excitatory neurotransmitter in your brain. It's responsible for a lot of our vital functions. It's getting us going. But sometimes what they think might be happening in OCD is that there's too much glutamate. And actually, when the brain cells are overwhelmed with glutamate, it actually signals this cascade of more glutamate, so much to the point that the brain cell is being overstimulated and it actually dies. They did some research with worms, and they either increased their amount of glutamate or they took away some parts in their brain that would clear this excess glutamate. The worms exhibited very OCD-like behavior, repetitive behavior, very abnormal movement patterns going back and forth. Also notice this in mice as well. When they have taken mice whose genetic ability to clear glutamate is much less and expose them to glutamate, they had things like excessive grooming. They would just keep licking themselves over and over and over again. Some of the human studies that they've done is they found that there is excess glutamate in the cerebral spinal fluid. So that nice fluid that your brain hangs out in, they found that it had excess glutamate in it. So many of these things point to the fact that glutamate plays a huge role in OCD. If you are a person who has OCD or even anxiety and depression, glutamate also has roles in that. Something you might want to try to support your recovery is to eliminate anything with amounts of free glutamate in it. So the main two, which isn't everything, I'm sorry, but you might feel better, so it's worth it, is dairy and wheat. So when we have dairy and then we take it and we kind of homogenize it, we process it, we pasteurize it, that glutamic acid that's in it kind of breaks down. And they're not really bound to too much else, so they're more free. The person who is affected by glutamate, this may increase the amount of glutamate in their brain. And when you eat these things, obviously, you might be affected by them. So wheat and dairy, when they're kind of broken down, have a lot of free glutamate in them. Also things like tomatoes. Tomatoes themselves might not be too high, but when we take it and we boil it down into something like sauce, that's going to be a lot higher in the free glutamate. Broccoli, MSG, monosodium glutamate, basically pure glutamate. Walnuts might have some questionable amounts in them. You can look it up online also, things that have free glutamate in them. So when I personally eliminated these, I just felt better. I didn't feel so weird in my brain. I'm very sensitive to things, so I'll know right away. My OCD definitely calmed down In a clinically measured setting, ketamine acts as an NMDA receptor antagonist. So the NMDA receptor basically is the one that receives the glutamate in your brain. Basically what ketamine does, it acts as sort of like a roadblock for that glutamate to get into this receptor. So that's basically how that works. There's been some studies that it helps, there's been some studies that it doesn't, that it has side effects. So really look it up and learn for yourself. But it has proven to be effective in some studies, even against depression, anxiety, and things like OCD. So that is all I'm sure that your brain can handle today. Of course, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. If you're on anything like an SSRI, that's for you to be on between you and your doctor, not some random girl on YouTube. With that, I would really suggest trying just to eliminate those foods high in glutamate and see if you feel better, because I know how difficult it is to deal with something like OCD. So yeah, once again, my name is Brianna. I love to talk about brain chemicals, nutrition, and how it all affects the body and the brain. And I really wish you well in ultimate healing. And I pray that whatever situation you're in right now, that God would just heal you and make you well. Have a good day. Bye.